Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Wyoming Liberty Group's Parents Unite educational event. We really appreciate that you took your time out of your day to come here and participate with us. And we want to welcome everybody. We are filming for Facebook Live. We want to welcome everybody from Facebook as well. This is a first of 7 educational events. They're all Parents Unite educational events. The future events, we invite everybody to join us. Follow us on the website, follow us on Facebook. Get all the latest updates so you can keep up with us. Come join the events, participate. We think it's very important. We think parents are very important to our children's educational upbringing. Future events, we will have guest speakers and many other fascinating topics. Please follow us and join us on those. My name is Kevin Fuller. I am rather new to the Wyoming Liberty Group. I met Susan a little over a year ago at a training event. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I was a law enforcement officer for 25 years in New Mexico. When I retired, I still had the drive in me to help, want to make things better, help people make things better, make their lives better. I joined a couple other companies after I retired. I became a director of field ops for a media company. During that time, I was in Wyoming many, many times. One of those times is when I got to meet Susan about a year ago. When I met her, she's very dynamic. She was an inspiring individual. I liked her from the moment I met her. I was lucky a year ago to get to know her. And then fast forward a year, and I've had the opportunity to come to the Wyoming Liberty Group and be a part of what she has created here. I was very excited. I love Wyoming. I loved visiting Wyoming. We did lots of training events in Wyoming. And when I got this opportunity, and I went home and I told my wife, you know, I got this opportunity that we can go to Wyoming. It was kind of it was a future for us, a retirement future, and it actually got to come quicker because of this opportunity. Me and my wife came down and we came to Cheyenne and we started looking at houses right away, and we relocated as fast as we could, and we just absolutely love it. My wife's mother-in-law lives with us. She was able to join us this week finally. We had her stay with family while we were doing the move. She finally got to join us, and let me tell you, she loves Wyoming. Everybody we've met in Wyoming is fabulous, and it's going to be a great future for us. And I have Susan to thank for that. I get to introduce Susan. She'll introduce the rest of the staff. We wanted to take this first educational event, the Parents Unite event, and instead of having guest speakers, we wanted everybody to get a chance to know and introduce the staff at Wyoming Group. The Wyoming Liberty Group is here to work for Wyoming. We're here to work for you as parents. We're here to work for the legislators. And we want you to get to know us. We want you to feel comfortable to contact us. We want you just to really understand how Wyoming Liberty Group is. Susan Gore started Wyoming Liberty Group about 10 years ago. We are a educational organization, non-political policy think tank. That's a lot of ways of saying we're here to work for you. We're here. Susan herself has a bachelor's degree from Middlebury and a master's from Norwich. She got 3 sons and 14 grandchildren with a variety of educational experiences and needs, which I'm sure she'll be happy to tell you about. when I met Susan a year ago, and then again in talking about coming here to Wyoming, you will see it in her when she talks to you. She's an extremely caring individual. She cares about Wyoming. She cares about the people of Wyoming. She cares about the children of Wyoming. And I think you will all see that when she speaks to you. Susan, would you mind?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Kevin has been here about a month now. And I introduced a friend to him, and afterward my friend said, you know, if you have a goal you want to accomplish in a year and you have an idea how to roll it out, tell Kevin, he'll get it done. So that's what he's here for. I'd like you to meet Cassandra, Cassie. She's an attorney. She's fierce. She's articulate. Cassie, I got to know her even better because she just completed a murder trial where a mother was falsely accused of killing a baby. And the prosecutor was very aggressive, and they hid evidence and so on. And the jury found, after 2 weeks of deliberation, not guilty on all counts. We kind of went through that, so you know you can count on her. Austin is here. Austin Hine is here from DC, where he had experience with our United States Congress, and he's a Westerner. He came back pretty quick, and he's going to help us with research. You have a question, a technical question about a policy matter. He can look it up for you and get back to you, so you can call us. Melissa is an intern with us for the summer. She just completed her certification for teaching in Wyoming, and she student taught in Casper, and she has quite a bit to say for us about what her experience is. And Jonathan Downing, I should have even mentioned you first because you've been with us a little longer, Jonathan. Jonathan got the transparency legislation through the legislature amazingly and continues to work. I want you to know him because oftentimes parents feel they can't affect the legislature or get to their legislature. If you call Jonathan, Jonathan will help you communicate. He will be in interim committees. He'll tell you what's going on. So please, he's going to speak with you a little later on that. The thing I'd like to talk about, first of all, we don't like labels very much. We are a think tank. We are a nonprofit. But I remember the saying, you can't judge a book by looking at its cover. I think the use of labels today, labeling children, labeling people, labeling groups, is not respecting human dignity and human worth. And but I do have to describe who we like to work with. It is the kind of person, no matter what they claim to be or what their label is, who when a neighbor's in trouble or friend's in trouble, they themselves reach out and give their own hand to help. Or they see what's really going on with people on the ground, and in spite of whatever is abstract or their argument, they care about taking care of that person. I call it the Good Samaritan principle. We're all a fan of parents. We see parents as being the first teachers of their kids. They teach them to walk, they teach them to speak, they teach them their manners, maybe they do. And even the Harvard studies, and we all know, and teachers know, that the big determiner of a kid's success is their parents, having their parents there for them. It doesn't really matter even what school they go to oftentimes. But beyond the parent, now the parents by natural law and by our tradition are the authority over the lives of their children. That authority is being questioned and threatened. It needs to be defended and asserted. And we would like to help you. If you're a parent interested in that, we would like to give you some ideas about what you can opportunities you can have for your children and that are all available now or that are possible to become available. We did a poll. Mandy put out a poll. We got about 41 people answering. And the poll to the people, it was on Facebook, was ranking what is important to parents, what they want for their children. And the thing they said, first of all, was they want their child to be able to read. Well, in the public schools now, they're not really learning that. We have about a 35% of proficiency in the grades 4 to 8 nationally, and it's higher in Wyoming, it's about 57%. But still, half the kids being able to read up to level isn't good enough. We have schools that even working with the same populations, we have charter schools. We all know Snowy Range in Laramie and Poder here in Cheyenne, and they run 80 and 89% proficiency. What's their secret? Well, we talked to Nick Avlina, and he said the first 3 weeks a kid comes to school, we work on behavior. The kid has to sit in class, he has to keep his head up, he has to finish his assignment, he has to, we test every Friday. And not only that, but there's no horseplay in the halls. And the kids come from family backgrounds and an environment where they don't know how to behave. But they have to learn to behave before they can learn. And speaking with Jessica, apparently this is a problem in all the schools, that the kids just don't come in knowing how to behave, and that's the biggest problem, learning to read or anything. Another thing about reading is kids vary a lot. I know that our education committee at the legislature was saying a child must read by 3rd grade. Yes, but that doesn't address the individual needs of the child. So that kind of ironclad thing doesn't work either. I had a homeschool kid who learned at 10 years, and he's just doing just fine. The next thing the parent wanted, besides next to reading, was problem solving. Now, that's a kind of general question. So what did the parent have in mind about problem solving? What kind of problem? Well, Dr. Larson was recently in Vermont, and the same idea came up. And he said the best way to learn problem solving is through technical education. Well, I said, what's technical education? I have 14 grandchildren. Most of them are a little older, and I inquired. And they gave various answers about how do you learn. But one of them was very active. She was a computer science major, and a coder and that kind of thing. And she said, it's not about math, it's about logic. And so you will see, we have for you the kind of logic puzzles that elementary school kids do to learn to solve problems. And that's really what you need for computer coding, apparently. But there's another factor you need to solve problems. And I was directed to girls who code, because they were finding that girls were not learning to code, code languages. And what they found was girls they didn't have the courage or persistence. They were trying to be perfect. So when they met a problem, they would give up, because if they made a mistake, they'd give up. This is not just a problem for girls. It's a problem for anybody who wants to learn and to solve problems. You have to keep trying, persisting. So what they did was they basically told them to be bold. You can look up Girls Who Code TED Talk. And this really changed my granddaughter's life. She said, oh. And so the boys were doing better because they maybe naturally had a valor maybe to carry through to the conclusion. But everybody needs that kind of encouragement. The next thing parents wanted was, let me think what it was. What was it, Mandy? Third thing. Was it math? Yeah. Writing. The thing about writing is It's very important, particularly like as 10, 11, 12, 13, when your energy's coming up, you need to have boundaries, and you have to have grammar. It helps articulate what you want and what you want to say and where you are and where somebody else is. So for instance, you can say, I don't like it when you push me in the hall. That's very articulate. So writing is self-expressive, and that's another thing kids just aren't doing as much. Or it's also a problem-solving discipline, as we learn in Wyoming Liberty Group when we try to write for you, right? There are different styles of writing. And then the next one was math. And we have two people here. Amber Ash, I didn't introduce her. Amber is putting in, would you stand up, Amber? She's a county commissioner, and she just got through a lot of county commissioner work, but she has a daughter that she particularly wanted to learn math, and she kind of tried public and private. The other one is Cindy Elliott, and her daughter is sitting right next to her, and I know she knows her multiplication tables because she went to Potter and you went to Trinity Lutheran. But Amber is now doing some analysis for us on technical education and looking at charter school law, that kind of thing. So, and she also has worked on technical education in the schools. Technical education, I'm not sure what that is. When I taught in Vermont, the kids always had to build a wall. They had to, do the structure. They had to do the walls. They had to put in electrical and plumbing and insulate and paint and do that whole thing. Just an exercise in some of the hand things. Technical education was at the bottom of the list, but it's necessary to be able to do those things. I want to give you a little story about Vermont, just so you know my background very quickly. When I first had my kids, we were in Boston. They went to the public schools there. They learned to defend themselves on the playground, and by third grade, they could kind of read. We went to Vermont, and it was a public school, and my husband and I were founding a public 7 through 12 school with some other people. And the kids went to an elementary school. It was very friendly, open, and very easy school for them to go through. Talking to my kids about their educational experience, they said 3 things. First of all, their experience in the public K through 12, 7 through 12 school was better than their college in terms of education. It had wonderful faculty and a chance to individualize what they were studying. And they also said, even more so, they said, and by the way, all the books and magazines and talk you gave us at home, which was just automatic, was very important because that compensated for what was missing. At the school, my husband taught math. I did special education. I would substitute in Spanish, Spanish and science. Now, when we came back to Wyoming, we ran into two constitutional problems you will face as parents. One was that the Constitution says that Wyoming shall have a complete uniform system of public education. This reminds me of Frederick the Great. He was in the 1700s in Germany. He was a Prussian, and he was a military man. He always wore his uniform, and he instituted an education system where everybody must be prepared for the army. And that system of control, top-down and control, became popular with some Americans. At the same time of our Constitution, there was a fear, people of different religions were having some of the odds with each other. The Protestants didn't want the Catholics to come in. And these so-called Blaine amendments we also have in the Wyoming Constitution, which prevent public money, supposedly, from going to sectarian schools. Now, we have 41 private schools in Wyoming. All but 2 of them are Christian schools because you can't have a Christian education in our public system. The question is a secular education neutral? And my opinion is no, it's not as corrosive. It's another worldview. And but somehow it has taken over our schools. And I think those two things are a problem. First of all, uniformity when all the kids are different. It's also gave legislatures the sense that they have to know more even than parents and to what's going on in the schools. And the courts have talked about this uniformity as uniformity money has to be. It's all about money. Well, really, we need a constitution amendment. We need to fix these things. The sectarian question is maybe coming before the Supreme Court at some point. A lot of parents around the country are concerned. But the thing about a uniform education where the legislature calls all the shots is a bad idea. Not that it's completely practiced. Now, within the public school system, we have certain opportunities, like the virtual academy is one. And so there can be change and adaptation within the public system. The thing is, though, when you have a voluntary cooperation, it's creative. And so if you have at least a parallel voluntarism, it helps the public system, and it certainly gives parents the opportunity of what kind of choice their children have. There is a question some people don't like. I mean, a lot of homeschoolers would not like to take any public money. They don't want any strings attached. The government talks about what they have to do with their children. One of my grandsons graduated. We didn't graduate. He dropped out at 17 from his little Christian school after being homeschooled. He took a job in a body shop. He organized ultimate Frisbee, and he made himself generally useful. Then he took the college tests, and he went to college, and he's doing very well in college. So those kinds of things are possible for people. We have a choice in here for parents. You can work with the public system, and that's all to the better if you can get there. But it's very hard as a single parent to go and be heard without being worn out by administrative problems. On the other hand, to expand private choice is a problem because it takes people getting together and persisting. That's one reason we're saying parents unite. Unless there's a civic group consistently there, insisting on parent choice and educational choice, it doesn't happen. Where it does happen, which is states like Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin, there has always been that group of people insisting on this. So that's why we're here today to offer you assistance, because it's hard to just, without some staffing and some outside support from groups such as ours, to accomplish those kinds of ends. So with that, I'd like to ask Jonathan to speak. Jonathan will talk about helping you get through to your legislators and the legislature, and Austin Hine. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. And I'm Jonathan Downing with the Wyoming Liberty Group. This is Austin Hine, who recently joined us, does a great job on research and policy analysis. I'll turn it over to Austin real quick and then wrap up after him. But one of the roles that we work as far as our government relations side of the Wyoming Liberty Group is to provide policymakers and elected officials with potential policy solutions, either homegrown in Wyoming or what other states are trying around the country. Just because it's done in one state doesn't mean it's going to work for Wyoming. And in the meantime, trying to work with some of those stakeholders as we develop solutions to the challenges that we face in Wyoming as far as education. There are areas where we're doing very well in seeking to fund and ensure that those tax dollars are going far. At the same time, we're always hearing about the need for improvement or the challenges that parents have. And so with that, I'll turn part of this over to Austin, then wrap up.
Absolutely. So as Susan had mentioned, I actually am coming from Washington, D.C. I went from a swamp to this lovely state. Much better here, I think. A little bit more free, a little more breathing room. And there are a lot of things I really enjoy about this state. And what I want to do is provide a resource for everyone here and everyone at home to be able to empower parents and empower their own children and facilitate their learning. And I want to do that by exploring a couple different policy options. Some of the policy options we're working on right now are like education savings accounts, as well as maybe loosening that grip on charter schools and helping them out as well. And so I want to be a resource for you, and I also want to be a resource for our legislators. If there's anything I can do to please help, I'd be glad to help. I'll be glad to look into some numbers for you and pull up some research. Feel free to give me a call at the office, and I'll be glad to assist you.
Great. And the office number is 307-632-7020. And if you also are following us on Facebook Live right now, you can also go to our Facebook page and private messenger us, and that'll be another way to get in contact with us. But one of the last pieces that I was asked to speak about is how do you get legislation passed? How do you work through the legislative process? And those types of things. Legislature this last year passed an efficiency commission bill that we've been working on for the last 2 years, and mainly it was seeking to find ways to find efficiencies within Wyoming government, possibly at the local level as well. But as tax dollars get strained and constrained with revenues that are coming in right now, as well as the challenges with how we currently fund education, those areas as far as ways that we can find means and methods to tighten our belts and to do more with less as we try to retool state government based off of the current revenues that we have. And so as part of that process, it begins with getting with your legislators, seeking to educate them on the issues that you care about. And then from there, they may want to develop a piece of legislation, or we can show them model legislation that's been tried in other states. Some of that work occurs during the interim or before the legislative session that always happens in the winter. During that time, it's important to reach out to your legislators to get them engaged, email them or talk to them. This year's an election year, so it's a great time to get their attention. We also have a few candidates here tonight, so thank you for joining us tonight as far as candidates. And main part is that get involved. If you don't know how to get involved, reach out to us. The next steps in the process, when we get into the legislative session, then you'll be surrounded by a bunch of advocates and lobbyists and think tank or other types that are going to be around that are seeking to get their ideas out on the table for the legislature as they're considering these issues. From there, legislation moves forward. If there's something that you don't like or you say, hey, we need to support this, those are the opportunities where you can get involved and make your voice heard. And that's a great part about Wyoming, is that you can be heard by your legislators. And just a few weeks ago, there were some that were talking about the education issues, and they're still getting at least 100 emails a week right now regarding the challenges of education in Wyoming. And that's a key piece to share your part and your thoughts on how those issues come across. And then from there, what those policy solutions may be. Because it's, as we're talking about education choice this evening and throughout the 7-part series, we have seen some solutions that have come across in other states that may work for Wyoming. With our population, it's also a challenge because in some communities that might not work completely, but we also have the virtual charters, I've drawn a blank on it now, but the virtual academy that can be an option for some students or families when the traditional route through a K-12 system doesn't necessarily work. And so just putting those ideas out there. We'll be around later, so if you want to get a hold of us, we can share more on that at that time. And I'll turn it back to Susan.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Those 100 emails were all from people who wanted to maintain high levels of spending in the schools. There was nobody, the senator I spoke with said for 100 people demanding more money for schools, there would maybe be one in support of what he was doing. So we desperately need people to be knowing when to email and to do the emails. Now, when I introduced people, they weren't sitting on the stage, they're sitting back there. I forgot to introduce you to the general, and that is Maddie Lipke, and you have to know about her because she's there and she makes things happen. There's a reason we call her the general. She can take care of you. But sitting next to her is the one I call Sunshine. If you're having a bad day, you call, 632-7020, and Lisa McLean will answer the phone. And And just hearing her voice will make you feel better. She makes us feel better too. So we have to all acknowledge that. Another thing Jonathan didn't mention was that we're often the only ones in an interim committee meeting that have the best public in mind. Most people are working for government, or they have a beef, but there are very few representatives of freedom there. Jonathan, what would you say in terms of how many people actually show up and to speak about freedom?
Well, for an interim committee meeting, we're the only think tank out there that's handling the freedom and these types of issues in the movement, as far as trying to get some of these issues on the table with the conservative movement, and also looking at the constitutional basis for some of our challenges that we're facing as a state and what is a proper role of government in those areas. There's a couple others that cover it during the legislative session, but during the interim, we're pretty much the only one there as far as in that end. There are other industry folks.
Now we have to say, this man got the transparency. I mean, he and others, but Jonathan shepherded the transparency legislation through. Was very important for us. You might know that 50% of the schools who were repeatedly asked couldn't even show their checkbook, and that the law requires that you must. So we don't know where the money's going in the schools.
Well, and that's the part of what the Corporations Committee is currently working on, as far as seeking to try and simplify the process by which you can have more transparency in government right now. And when we were reviewing some of the initial data on transparency, one of the issues we noticed was that you might have a cell phone bill in the western part of the state that does not match the same cost in the eastern part of the state. And so when you have transparency, you can see where there might be areas for cost savings. In other parts of Wyoming government, we have had challenges at the local level where you have had fraud, waste, and abuse within some of those areas. And you read about them in the paper about once a quarter right now. There was a situation where a fire district had an embezzlement issue earlier this year that got resolved. But the challenge there is that if you have transparency and you have sunshine on spending, that can improve and get it more transparent to how are we spending our money and where is it going.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan knows how to speak diplomatically. I'm furious about transparency because if we have, say, we have to fill out a form for the government, what we got when we made when those requests came in, they said, gee, they ignored us. Suppose somebody works for you, bring me a report. They ignore you. You ask again, they ignore you. You keep asking, they ignore you. Or they say, I have to ask my lawyer. Or they say, I'm sorry, you have to pay me extra if you want it. That's a transparency fee. That's the way we were treated by government, when the statute is very clear. So I'm very, very strong on that, and we need it in our schools. They're asking for money, but they don't tell us how they're spending it. Now, the next person I'd like to hear is Jessica Leach. And go ahead, Jessica, tell us about your experience.
So my name is Jessie, and as Susan mentioned, I just finished my education in education. I student taught in Casper last semester. And in my experience in the College of Education, I learned a lot of things, and I think I had 3 big takeaways as to what makes an education more effective. And I think the first thing would be that wherever there's choice or wherever there's competition, educational outcomes will improve. I student taught in Natrona County, and in Natrona County, they have something called open enrollment, which means that students aren't forced to go to the school closest to where they live. They can attend school in any part of Casper. And as a result, the public schools there have to compete for students, and there's not one outlying school that is really, really bad in Casper. So that's one thing that I learned, is that choice and competition improve educational outcomes. The second thing I learned is that when there is a lack of regulation and a freedom for teachers to teach, students do better and curriculum is a lot more engaging for students. I had the opportunity to observe Snowy Range Academy in Laramie, and I got to watch a 5th grade class. In that 5th grade class, students were learning about the different types of world governments. When I was teaching 7th graders, they were beginning to learn that same content. So when teachers have freedom, more deregulation, and a chance to choose their own curriculum, the curriculum itself becomes more engaging, higher level thinking. And the third thing I learned is that good teachers make for good education. When you have competition, when you have choice, there's an incentive to hire and find better teachers. to get rid of poorly performing teachers. And so lack of regulation, more choice can result in that and a better education for all of our kids.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have this lavalier. Oh, yeah. We're going to share these with you, too. Another thing that we do, we mentioned defending a mother falsely accused. We also are working on an Illinois case where a student recorded a conversation with his principal and was then accused of a felony. A felony ruins somebody's life. This is a free speech issue. And we're also in corporations regularly of defending free speech in Wyoming. There are a lot of people somebody wants to shut somebody else up, so they try to make a law to prevent them from speaking. We've worked in that area for a long time, and we know it's also a problem in our schools, the pressure for political correctness and that kind of thing. So we work in those areas. Now we get to hear from Cassie Craven. And Cassie knows a lot, and come on, Cassie.
Well, it's so nice to be with you all here this evening. Contrary to what Susan says, I don't know a lot, but I have been basically a lifelong student. I'm an attorney here in Cheyenne in private practice. I'm only 27 years old, but as she's told you, I've already had a lot of, I guess, real world experience on some interesting things. So my particular practice doesn't have a criminal focus at all. In fact, that was pretty rare that I'd take a criminal case. However, I'm a firm believer in liberty, and I'm a firm believer in government playing by the rules. In that case, we saw justice done, and the jury came to the proper verdict, and so that's where we are. But today I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background, and thank you for the lovely introduction, Susan. I've been lucky enough this year to be contracted with the Wyoming Liberty Group. So in addition to my private law practice, I get to work with them on specific issues. Education choice is one of those issues. Public records is the other issue, and she spoke to you a little bit about that. I want to do a very quick shout out to our legislators, any that may be watching. Thank you for taking the public record issue seriously. As Jonathan said, transparency and sunshine will only bring light to a lot of issues, and educational choice is one of those issues. Now, one thing I want to talk to you about is funding. So a lot of people say that school choice is no good because you're going to be taking money from the public school system that already doesn't have enough money, and it's going to be sucked into the private sector and all of this stuff. Statistically, that is not true. In 2018, there were nearly 500,000 ESAs, vouchers, and tax credit scholarships received nationwide. In Wyoming, there were 0. And when people tell you that it's expensive and we don't have the funds for it, of these 500,000 programs accepted by kids, the spending on these was roughly 0.3% of the national expenditures on K through 12 education. Now, the reason for that is simple. There is this preconceived notion by many people that it's us versus them. The government's money, it's in the public school system, it's our taxpayer dollars at work. It's time that parents unite to flip that notion on its head. Those are our tax dollars being expended. So what is the legitimate reason why the tax expenditures can't be calculated per child and follow that child throughout life to whatever educational outcome serves them best, whether that's a public school or a charter school or homeschooling? Why can we not consider policy alternatives that divvy out the dollar amount per child so that the parents who know their child best can choose the education that best fits their own kid? We don't need the government telling us what's best for us. Parents know what's best for their children. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I didn't wake up one morning and just decide I wanted to be a lawyer 10 years ago. It happened when I was in the 3rd grade. And I have no idea why. I think I've always just wanted to help people, and I like to read books. And so I kind of put them together, and I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. But unfortunately, I was raised in a very small town in Nebraska. I had to drive to a school 20 miles away, and even that school only had 17 kids in my graduating class, and that was the big class in the high school. There was, of course, the one class with one boy, so we used to discuss, who's gonna be the prom queen, to be determined on that one still, but. So I was raised in a very small rural community. There was not a lot of opportunities, but moreover, it was riddled with politics of being in a small town, and I wasn't the banker's daughter, so I didn't get to be valedictorian. And when I got to college, I was mind blown at the amount of studying and materials that had to be done in any given day. Public education did not prepare me for the life I had chosen in my head for myself. So what did I have to do? I had to sit down and I had to learn everything that nobody taught me. And so for me, I'm a mother of two, and I'm married, and we live here, and I look around, and I just want a better option for my children than I was given. And I can already see the differences in them. One is outspoken, one is more reserved, one is a quick learner, one is a little more slow. What if they both didn't fit the same school? What if I had to send them different places? What if one needed extra tutoring? Wouldn't it be something if we could set forth laws and policies that allowed parents to have access to the resources that they need to craft particular case plans for each of their children? Children learn in different ways, and our legislation needs to accommodate that so that nobody is ever bound by economical means or zip codes based on which school they can go to. Parent choice is where it's at. Instructional choice, school choice, but mostly parent choice, where parents get to decide what's best for their children. Abraham Lincoln once said, "I never went to school more than 6 months in my life, but I can say this, that among my earliest recollections, I remember how when a mere child, I used to get irritated when anybody talked to me in a way I could not understand." And unfortunately, I've talked to so many people who are very smart, but maybe they just think in a different way, who had an awful school experience because they felt talked down to or confused until the point where they were just so discouraged that they gave up and they didn't learn. Statistics show that 37% of high school graduates are not prepared for college because the public school system focuses on the factory model. It's kind of what we're doing right now. You all sit in your chairs, I resuscitate information to you, I give you a test, you pass or fail, and I move on. That produces what's been called by education scholars the Swiss cheese effect, where you're just shuffled along from grade to grade, the teachers are done with you and ready for you to move on, and you're done. So you put your head down and you get through it. But what happens is it's Swiss cheese and there's holes in it, in your gaps of learning. And you might very well be like me, who knew I wanted to be a lawyer, knew I needed these logical test-taking skills, and I never learned them. So there I am in college, way behind the curve. And I feel like as Wyoming citizens with such great access to our legislator, that these are the types of concerns that we need to be telling them. Because like we said, we heard it straight from the horse's mouth. Out of 100 emails, maybe one will be about what we're discussing here tonight. 99 of them are, we need more funding in our public schools. So it's time for parents to unite, to speak out about the individual concerns. I think it oftentimes gets overlooked, but our legislators truly do care about what we think. We just have to tell them. And if there's a support group around the idea, it's all the more successful. And so that's what we hope to be, is your support group. In our country, we've seen a rising tide of mediocrity. The standardized testing data shows that the United States is right in the middle of the pack when it comes to standardized testing. So maybe it's time to challenge the preconceived notion that the Common Core isn't so common at all, that each individual child requires unique things. So what we want to do for you is to take these ideas to our legislator to come up with the laws on tax credits and savings programs and the logistics of how those work. But to do that, we need to make the upcoming events successful, and we need to have a lot of support and rallying. So I'll close up here. I don't want to keep you too long, and we want to have a good opportunity for Q&A for everyone at home and for here as well. But I would just encourage you, this is the first of many events that we wanted to do to kind of prime you on the ideas. I put together a handout in the back of the room that explains the logistics of each of the alternatives, and I don't want to bog it down with that. We wanted to focus tonight on the ideas. So please follow us on Facebook, keep in touch, bring your friends to the next event. We're going to have panels from people around the country who have seen these programs implemented and work. And what it can do is it can put money in your pocket so that you can choose what is best for your child. Because no child should be denied the opportunity of a good future and to not be behind the curve. Our kids deserve better than what we had. And if you had a good experience, that's great for you. But if you had a poor experience, that's all the more reason that we should look at new alternatives in different states. Kids don't usually have lobbyists or public relation firms, but they have us, and we are prepared to fight for you and to fight for them. So I encourage you all to challenge the status quo, ask us questions, stay after, give us your email, we'll keep you posted. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions that you have, but I want to thank you all for attending very much.
We are moving forward with two specific alternatives. One is an education scholarship program. There's a weakened version of that in the last session. It's never been properly promoted. But the idea is, first of all, because we have the Blaine Amendment, it's hard for us to have vouchers because maybe some possibilities, but vouchers can't go to they can't go to people of faith or that don't have the secular faith. So that means that voucher schools have to be very careful to avoid anything called religious. So that's one initiative we want to frame. The way that works is that the minerals industry, instead of giving $1 to the government, gives it to a nonprofit, and the nonprofit works with scholarships for parents to tailor a program for that child. Different versions are being discussed of that. The other thing is charter schools. There are only 4 charter schools in Wyoming. One of them is Poder. The other is Snowy Range. I don't even know the other 2.
There's another in Laramie, the Montessori school, and then there's one in Riverton.
Okay, one, a Montessori school and a Riverton school. Okay. So it's very hard for a charter school to get established because it has to be, you go through the school boards and be approved by the district. Districts see it as competitive. Schools that have a lot of charter schools have a state board. So we'd like to see, and people are studying it, including Amber Ash, are studying the charter school law to see what those 2 reforms we can make. If you have questions about things you'd like to see in education, please bring them up in your question process. But you see, we have the ability now to make this happen. It's been done in other states, a lot of support from other states. And you can see we have people who can make it, know how to help you, if you get behind it. Okay. So questions? From you, we're taking questions from 2 places, you guys, and also coming over online.
Austin will go around with the microphone so we can all hear, and then we'll alternate and take Facebook Live questions after. Go ahead, Drew.
I'm Lynn Hutchings, and I'm running for state senate. And I hear this all the time. We need to put more money in the schools. What's a good answer?
I didn't quite understand you. Put what?
We need to put more money into the school system. What is a good answer to that question, or to that, statement?
Well, my answer would be, first of all, we don't want to put it into a uniform system. The current system is overloaded with administrators. The Poder School has 200, how many students? Maybe it's 150, but they have, I think it's 150 students. They have different two different schools. They have 4 people, 4 administrators, 2 principals, and 2 founders that help them. I don't know what the ratio is in the other schools, but we know it's way overloaded. We don't know how much we're paying the administrators because guess what? They're not giving us salary information. So, so they're asking for money without giving information. If you don't deliver on, if you don't obey the law, if you don't deliver on your job, then you shouldn't be paid. And I believe that if you're not transparent, you shouldn't get funding. Then they figure out how to be transparent.
And I had something I wanted to add to that. My first point is completely aligned with Susan's, which is before you ask for more money, we need to know where what you had went. I think that's a pretty logical question. Part 2 of that is funding education is not a bad thing. Where the problem comes is the fact that that funding is not backpacking with the child. It doesn't need to be tied to a geographical location like a public school. It needs to be tied to the child. It's the child's funds, not the government's.
There's also a justice question here because some people don't want to touch public money. They just want to take care of their kid. But people who have resources can take care of their kids and specialize, but not everybody has those resources. And so making that publicly available and using public money gives a lot of opportunity to people who wouldn't have it otherwise. No more questions? None from anywhere.
Everybody on Facebook is good right now, so unless anybody from the
Okay,
audience has
and
one.
none here. Cindy, would you mind telling us your experience with math and your decisions? Could you come up so you get on camera?
My name is Cindy. My daughter goes to Poder Academy. She has gone since kindergarten. Before she had ever started school, my stepdaughter was in Laramie County School District number 1. And we happened to have her one evening, and she was sitting doing homework. And it was subtraction of 2-digit numbers, if I recall correctly. And she's trying to do it and struggling. And I looked at it and I said, well, why don't you use the borrowing method that I'm sure everybody in this room remembers learning in school? She goes, well, that's not how we do it. Well, how do you do it? She goes, I don't know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? I said, how are you supposed to get the right answer if you don't know what it is you're learning? And how are you supposed to explain it to us so we can help you? And she said, I don't know. And she was almost in tears, just distraught that she couldn't explain how to do her homework. And so my husband and I sat down and taught her how to borrow from multi-digit numbers, and it worked and it clicked. And I remember hearing from her mom later that she didn't get credit for those answers because they weren't taught through Common Core. And they couldn't show the answers in whatever newfangled manner that they were asking her to show. And I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. I said, she got the same answer. Why would that have been a problem? And now my daughter is in 2nd. She's going into 3rd grade this year. And she started learning math, subtracting 2-digit numbers. And guess what? They're teaching her how to borrow and carry. And she picked it up in not long at all. It was kind of amazing. And that was one of my big draws when signing her up for Poder was that they don't follow Common Core. I know how to help my daughter with her homework.
Thank you. Thank you. I spoke with a math teacher, 4th grade math teacher, taught for a long time. And he said, you know, I don't really understand it either. He said, before I teach it, I have to go back and look at the books so I got the process so I can go through it. And my son's a mathematician. He says it's ridiculous. You should try those problems. And also in your packet, you have the logic problems. And you can, if you want more copies of those, you can either print them out or ask us for copies. You might try to try those kinds of things. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Thank you for running, by the way. Are you the only person who's running here? It's just you, Lynn? Or? Okay. Okay, good.
Thank you, everybody. We want you to really take away one piece of information. We want parents to be involved. We want to help you be involved. Use us for that help. Come see us, call us. Any one of our staff would be happy to help you. If you don't know how to get involved, we will help you. We will help you find the way that you feel is easy. Just like every child is unique and they need a unique education, we may have unique ways we need to help, and we will find those ways to help you. Please follow us on Facebook. Follow us for the next event, August. We don't have the exact date set yet, but it will be out there. Anything else?
No, just thank you for coming and enjoy your evening.
Thank you very much, everybody.